After years of exclusion, my in-laws suddenly wanted me on family trips, only to use me as a free nanny and maid. So I'm a 29-year-old woman, and I've been with my husband, Ryan, who's 33, for 4 years now. We've been married for 2 of those years, and everything's generally fantastic between us. Well, except for one thing. Ryan never ever takes me along on his annual family trips. Seriously, that's the one thing we've always had issues with, and I've never quite understood why he does this. When we first started dating, Ryan mentioned that his family has this yearly tradition of going on a vacation for a couple of days. I thought it sounded pretty cool, especially since I come from a not-so-great family background. My parents are divorced, and family vacations were never really a thing for us. Naturally, I was looking forward to doing these fun trips with his family once we got married. In our second year together, I totally expected him to invite me along because, we were serious, we were even living together. But nope, he didn't, and I was like, okay, maybe he's waiting until we're married. After we got married, I was absolutely sure I'd be joining them. But last year, he left for the trip without inviting me again. At that point, I was really disappointed. Before he left, I decided to ask him why he hadn't asked me to come along. He looked super confused and said he thought I wouldn't be interested in going. That caught me off guard because I had always told him I loved the idea of these family trips and wanted to be a part of them. Ryan knows about my weird childhood and how I've always wanted to be a part of a close-knit family like his. Plus, his family seemed to love me, his parents, sister, brother-in-law, and their kids were always great with me. I couldn't understand why he thought I wouldn't want to join them, so we had this big argument before he left last year. I felt really hurt and insulted because he never considered my feelings, even after I had made it clear I wanted to go. We fought about it because I needed to get to the bottom of this. That's when Ryan finally confessed that it wasn't just him assuming. His family wasn't comfortable with me tagging along on their trips. Ouch, right? I was shocked because I had always thought I got along well with them. They treated me like family on holidays and special events. So where was this coming from? Ryan explained that his family wasn't ready for me to join because they felt that they'd have to be overly formal, and it would be awkward. They wanted to get to know me better over the next few years before inviting me on such an intimate trip. They compared it to Ryan's sister's husband, who's been around since high school, so it was different with him. I was really hurt, but realized it wasn't Ryan's fault, so I couldn't blame him. Although I was confused and upset, I didn't want to press the issue further. While Ryan was away, I did a lot of thinking and decided I would try even harder to become a part of his family. I wanted my in-laws to feel totally comfortable around me and not feel the need to put on a facade. When Ryan and his family returned, he apparently had a talk with them about our argument. They apologized for not inviting me and explained their reasoning. Ryan, his sister, and her husband all have super busy jobs as an investment banker, and they're in the medical field, so their family time is precious to them. They didn't realize I felt so left out and genuinely apologized for it. They promised to include me once they were more comfortable, so I guess that's a step in the right direction. Anyway, I'm working hard on building that comfort level with them because I don't want a strained relationship with my in-laws, especially since my relationship with my own FA, Miley, isn't great. Maybe I'm a bit of a people pleaser, but I really do want them to like me and eventually see me as part of their tight-knit group. They apologized from bottom of their hearts. They also mentioned they were willing to meet me halfway, and they genuinely wanted to make me feel more included and like part of the family. This discussion was much needed. After that, I decided to get to know them better on my own, which is what I meant when I said I started going out of my way. Even if my husband wasn't visiting his parents, I would still make it a point to see them at least every 2 weeks. During my visits, we seemed to have a nice time together, or at least that's what I thought. They appeared to enjoy my company, just like anyone else would have felt in my situation, because they put on these happy faces that made it hard to tell if they were acting or not. Anyway, I assumed they were having a good time with me and appreciated my visits, so I kept doing it. I wouldn't be there all the time, of course, just occasionally. As they had mentioned, they'd try to meet me halfway and make me feel part of the family. So, I had no reason to think they were getting annoyed by my visits. Apparently, though, that's what they told my husband this year when they refused to invite me again, which broke my heart. I had really tried to be a part of the family and be there as their daughter-in-law, and yet all of my efforts seemed to go unnoticed. This happened a couple of days ago, and when I found out, I was heartbroken. I had truly felt that my in-laws and I were getting along well, and believed I would be part of the family trip this year. Last week, Ryan told me that the family was planning to go to California this year for their annual vacation. I was really excited, thinking I would be part of the trip. But as he went on talking about it, he didn't mention anything about me. When I asked if I'd be joining them or not, he seemed kind of upset and said his parents hadn't mentioned anything about it. I knew he was lying, so after some convincing, he finally admitted that his parents said they were kind of done with me. They claimed I'd been visiting too frequently and they needed some space, thinking I was forcing my presence on them, even though they'd supposedly made it very clear they needed space. I had no idea what they were talking about because they never actually communicated this. Every time I visited or spoke to them, they seemed to enjoy it. I told Ryan about it, and he said he had tried to convince his parents, but they were pretty stubborn and said I wasn't welcome this year. I was very upset and got into a huge fight with Ryan because I didn't want him to go on the trip if I couldn't go as well. I felt his parents were being very unfair to me. They had previously assured me they'd try to include me and get to know me better, which is why I had tried so hard to build a relationship. Now, they were acting as if I was the one imposing on them, which I found very insulting. I expressed to Ryan that this was not the way to treat me, and I didn't appreciate his parents' behavior. He told me the annual trip was very important to him because it was a time to spend with his family. He would have loved for me to join, but his parents didn't want that, and he couldn't argue with them. He said he could see both sides, which was ridiculous to me because I didn't think his parents had a valid point. I felt they were just being fickle-minded and making me look like the bad guy for trying to get along with them. If they didn't want me to come along, they should have just said that instead of coming up with arbitrary reasons. We got into a big fight, and I told him I didn't want him to go on the trip and wanted him to take a stand for me. He said I was being silly and petty and went on the trip anyway. After he left, I was very disappointed with how I was being treated in this family. I had always tried my best to be there for everyone and become a part of the family. My own parents had never been very connected with me, and when I met my in-laws, I thought maybe they would like me better. Even now, my parents and I don't really talk much, but I envied the relationship Ryan had with his family and wanted to be part of that. So, I didn't think it was wrong for me to try and get them to like me. I might have gone a bit overboard in trying to be liked, but it was only because they themselves had said they'd try to make me feel like part of the family. I also noticed a difference in how my sister-in-law's husband and I were treated. I just wanted to be loved by these people, and I don't think I was wrong for trying. These thoughts kept running through my head, and I kept feeling sorry for myself. At that point, I felt Ryan didn't care about me either. While I could forgive his family for treating me badly, I couldn't forgive him. I was half inclined to leave before he came back from his trip. 2 days after he left, he called me, which surprised me. I didn't answer the first time because I was very pissed off, but then he texted that it was an emergency and necessary for me to answer. After that, he FaceTimed me, and to my surprise, his entire family was with him, his parents, his sister, and his brother-in-law. They all looked really nervous to talk to me, and I didn't understand what was going on. So, here's what went down. I asked him to have a chat with me, and to my surprise, he told me that everyone was there to apologize. It was such a pleasant surprise. He also mentioned that he had talked to his parents about what I had said, and they had come to realize their mistakes. They were so eager to make things right that they planned to fly down and spend the rest of the trip with us. His parents even spoke to me directly. They admitted that Ryan had spoken to them and made them realize how unfairly I had been treated. They felt genuinely, shamed of their selfish behavior and hadn't considered my feelings at all. Their apologies were so heartfelt. My mother-in-law even got a bit teary-eyed and admitted that Ryan had told them I was only trying to reach out and that they had been selfish and inconsiderate. They wanted to make it up to me by inviting me along for the rest of the trip and said they would be heartbroken if I didn't join. Although they'd understand if I declined, they really wanted me to be part of it. On the call, I felt pretty confused because I had been feeling insulted earlier, but then again, I believe in second chances, and I really love Ryan. I wanted to make it work, so I told him I'd think about it. Later that evening, I decided I was ready to join them. I thought it over and concluded that everyone deserves a second chance. So, I booked my flight ticket and flew down to meet them. They were there to receive me at the airport, and we drove to an Airbnb, which was a bit unexpected since we're all pretty well off. I assumed we'd be staying in a fancy hotel. However, the Airbnb was far from the city hustle and quite secluded. They explained that no nearby hotels had available rooms, and the ones that did weren't good enough, so they opted for an Airbnb. It was close to the beach and in a pretty nice spot if you think about it, but the downside was that they had to do everything themselves. No housekeeping or room service meant cooking and cleaning up was on us. I'm used to being independent because, growing up, my parents were rarely home, so I did everything myself, from cooking to laundry. Even now, with a housekeeper, I prefer doing some things on my own. Ryan, on the other hand, grew up with help for everything. The lack of services meant they had to fend for themselves, which they didn't like. Once I arrived, they subtly started delegating chores to me, thinking I wouldn't catch on. But I'm not stupid. I might be a people pleaser, but I wasn't going to let them treat me like an unpaid nanny and cook. They complained about having to do everything themselves because all the hotels were booked. I understood what they were hinting at. They pretended to help, but clearly wanted me to handle everything since I was the best at it. The next morning, they even asked me to stay with my sister-in-law's kids while they went sightseeing. That's when I lost it. I realized they had invited me just to use me, and I told them I was better off staying home if that was the case. They tried to calm me down, insisting they didn't mean to insult me, but I knew what was up. They only wanted me around as free help. I made it clear I would either be there as part of the family or I'd leave. They finally confessed that they had initially invited me to help with the kids because their nanny couldn't make it. Apparently, it was my mother-in-law's idea, which I found incredibly disrespectful. I was very upset, feeling like their apology was meaningless, but they insisted they meant every word. They begged me to stay, promising I wouldn't have to do anything and could just relax. After a lot of apologizing and pleading, I decided to stay as long as they didn't ask me to do any chores. I figured I could enjoy a free vacation and made up my mind to get back at them later. For the rest of the trip, I did nothing while they handled all the work, and I already had a plan for how I'd deal with this once we got back home. So, basically, they had to make up for the way they had treated me, and I just decided to chill in my room and plot my revenge. Yesterday was the day we were all supposed to head back home, and as soon as we got to the airport, I could totally sense that everyone was super annoyed with me. Why? Because I had stuck to my word that I wasn't going to lift a finger to help with anything. Deep down, I think they were pretty pissed, even though they were trying to act all nice and sweet. But honestly, at that point, I didn't care. I already had this plan that would show them exactly why messing with me was never a good idea. So once we boarded the flight yesterday, it didn't take long for my plan to kick into action. See, 2 of my friends also boarded the flight with us. I mean, they had been with us for the whole vacation, but my in-laws didn't piece it together until I greeted my friends and then took a seat away from my family. I had booked my tickets separately on purpose. Ever since I'd flown down, and they had disrespected me by assuming I'd be their servant for the trip, I'd been talking to my friends about it. They were just as outraged as I was, and we decided we'd all head back home together and then go on a road trip from there. I actually sat just 1 row behind my in-laws, and when they noticed I wasn't sitting with them, they asked what was going on. That's when I spilled the beans to Ryan about what had been brewing in my mind for the past few days. The day after they had insulted me, I spoke to my friends, and we cooked up this whole plan. One of my friends lives in California, so it wasn't a big deal for her, and the other one flew down to California just for this. I could have had them fly directly to my hometown, but I wanted to make a point. I didn't even want to share the flight back with my in-laws. I'd been trying to be kind to them, but now that I'd seen their true colors, it was time for them to see mine. When I explained everything to Ryan, he said I was being super petty and that he wasn't okay with me just taking off on a road trip with my friends as soon as we got back because it would be inconvenient for him. But, honestly, I didn't care about his feelings at that point. I told him I was leaving him because he had shown me he couldn't stand up to his parents for my sake. That was another reason I invited my friends on the flight back. I needed their support when I told him what was up. I had already talked to my lawyer, and he was preparing the divorce papers. As soon as I got back from the road trip, I was going to file for divorce. I wasn't even going to go back home because after everything that happened, it just wasn't worth it. Ryan had let his parents disrespect me over and over, and this time they had gone too far. My friends took my side and told him I had made up my mind. There was no turning back, and with my friends there, he couldn't manipulate me into giving them another chance. The whole flight back was pretty tense. After I told Ryan I was leaving him, we didn't speak for the entire duration of the flight. I was actually happy about that. I was sitting right behind him, but couldn't care less. I was just thrilled to be around my friends again. For context, these 2 women had been with me since middle school. We had separated after college, but kept in touch. Ryan didn't approve of my friendship with them and made me distance myself from them once we got together. Like a fool, I did what he asked because I wanted to make him my priority. His reasons were stupid. He thought they were manipulative and that I had become a doormat for them, and I just believed him. But now that I had seen that Ryan was completely spineless, I told my friends, and they were standing up for me. After we landed, we went our separate ways. I didn't even go home to pack for the road trip. I decided I'd just buy new clothes on the way, because I didn't want to be anywhere near Ryan or his family. That was yesterday. By the time we landed, they had stopped acknowledging my existence. This morning, Ryan sent me a long text. He said he was really disappointed with how I was acting, and admitted that his parents had been horrible to me. He acknowledged that it was wrong of him not to stand up for me, but wanted me to see it from his perspective. These were his parents, and he couldn't just disrespect them. Apparently, he didn't even realize what his mom was trying to do, because she had only spoken about it to my sister-in-law, not him. He didn't know they planned to make me cook, clean, and babysit. So, he thought it was unfair of me to blame him for that, and said he was feeling guilty about everything. So, he was really trying to make things right with me, and wanted me to join him on this road trip. He said if I didn't do it, it meant I never loved him in the first place. Now, I'm just sitting here, all confused, feeling like he's manipulating me. I know he is, but there's still a part of me that thinks maybe I should just talk it out with him. I never really gave him a chance to explain his side, because we couldn't talk on the flight back home. We didn't want to make a scene and disturb the other passengers. I chatted with my friends about all this, and they're totally against the idea of me talking to him. They just want me to block him and move on. I know they're right, but I guess I'm just looking for a second opinion to make sure I'm making the right decision. I feel a bit guilty for thinking about leaving my husband just because he didn't stand up to his parents for me. Update 1. First off, thanks a bunch for all the comments, even the tough love ones. I guess I needed a reality check. Ryan was always going to be the kind of guy who tried to manipulate me. He had red flags all over, but I was too blinded by my feelings to see them. Now that my friends and you guys have helped me see things clearly, I'm not going back. I blocked him and decided to go on this road trip with my friends to reconnect and rebuild the friendships I lost because of Ryan. Update 2. Just a quick update. I talked to my lawyer, and he said the divorce papers are ready. I can file the petition as soon as I get back from the road trip, which is perfect timing since I'll be home in a couple of days. So as soon as I return, I'm filing for divorce. I haven't heard anything from Ryan or his family, and honestly, I'm happy about that. I don't want to talk to him at this point. The road trip has been a blast, reminiscing about the good old times with my friends. I can't believe I gave all this up for Ryan. Update 3. Hey, so it's been about 2 months since I got back from my road trip. The divorce proceedings started a while ago, and we're in the middle of settlement negotiations now. They're going pretty smoothly, because Ryan's family managed to convince him that I was the bad guy, and he doesn't need me. I'm actually glad they did that because it made the divorce process a lot easier for me. Now, Ryan doesn't want anything from me, and is acting like he's too good for me, which is just fine. Good for him. He deserves whatever, and so do I.